Cut to the chase. This is a brief clip from the YoJoeShow Podcast, where we dive into everything: politics, tech, aviation, space, science, health, and medicine. Stick around for conversation that clips right to what matters.
So we know that last time around, we spent the episode essentially dedicated to Charlie Kirk, really what had happened. And there's been some time for things to settle. He had a really incredible memorial service coming up on his birthday. And it's interesting. Remember, I had mentioned on that episode that really the best tribute would be to be able to have a day, a Charlie Kirk Day, which it should have been on his birthday. And sure enough, on the 14th of October will be Charlie Kirk Day, at least this year. No one knows if it's going to be a repetitive thing year after year, but to celebrate what he stood for, which was free speech and open dialogue and debate. So we certainly will be participating, and that's what we do when we get together. We talk about things. We want to continue doing that and trying to be as uncensored as possible, despite platform limitations that we often have. So that being said, there's been other tributes and other things that people have mentioned they wanted to do. Here in Florida, there actually is the first sign of this, where there's, I believe it's in Lake County, they actually had a highway dedicated and renamed as a memorial road for Charlie Kirk. There's some rumor of one supposedly somewhere in Miami-Dade County. Haven't seen that yet, but at least people want to keep his legacy going. And there's been a lot of different talk, some of it really way out there about all these conspiracy theories that have come up. You and I discussed this. From what we saw, some of the ballistic experts that came on shortly after the assassination pointed out that he appeared to be wearing a bulletproof vest, and the bullet appeared to have hit the vest, deflected, and gone up into his head. Because there's all this question.
Recently, there was a little bit of a discussion because shooters will usually either aim for the head or for the heart. I was like, it's a little odd that they aimed for the neck and hit for the neck. And the theory was maybe they aimed for either and then they missed and it hit the neck. But apparently it was, you'll elaborate further.
Yeah, and honestly, obviously the center of mass, the chest, is where typically you'd expect there to be something. And sure enough, if that's true, then the bullet hit the upper chest and deflected upwards. And that, again, would have explained what the entrance wound looked like, why it was the way it was. It wasn't as clean as otherwise. But it is interesting that there are a number of platforms that are very large that are, as recently as the last few days, bringing up these, what I would call conspiracy theories. I do think it's a good idea to ask questions, though. But it's not everyone has all the information. And clearly the family does, clearly Turning Point does. And I think if there was anything really crazy, they would probably be standing up and saying something about it. That being said, people are also asking a lot about what his wife, the widow, Erica Kirk, has said, and when she spoke at his memorial service. And really, people were maybe surprised, but definitely touched by the fact that she forgave the person who murdered her husband. And there's been a lot of talk about that. And then Trump made some remarks about him not being as forgiving of his enemies and so forth. So there's this sort of debate about, should you forgive someone who does something like that? And in Catholicism and Christianity generally, there's this notion that you are to forgive and that the Creator has made us imperfect, and people will do things that are to be judged by the Creator, not by mortals, not by us on earth.
I think it was a very emotional moment people weren't expecting, and it really touched people very strongly. It's a beautiful thing that takes a lot of courage and strength.
It did, and it certainly opened the debate, because now obviously the assassin is facing the death penalty, as he should. People are saying, you know what, how can you do that? There are a lot of people that are against the death penalty, and their attitude is, well, what's the difference? You're going to take someone's life. And Charlie had been asked this question on different occasions, and we have a clip that includes his response, and his response from a religious lens, the way he understood religion. I'd like to play that, and then I'd like to have your thoughts on how you view things. And I believe that the death penalty serves a purpose, certainly as a deterrent, and that in some cases it is the correct thing to do. But
I think that what's so beautiful about Charlie is that because he was so open and he was always open to discussion with so many people on so many topics, basically on everything, almost anything that there's an issue to, you can basically reference a Charlie Kirk video about and hear what he has to say. And he's almost always so eloquent and kind and very good at explaining his opinions, and that's what we're going to do right now. So let's take a look about what Charlie said about what this murderer may deserve.
Here we go.
If someone were to murder Alex or murder me, they already murdered themselves in that action. They already bestowed the punishment upon themselves. We are simply completing the task. When you take another person's life, you already took your own life.
I have concerns over things like the death penalty. Is it, it's one of the 10 Commandments, you should not murder. So is it somehow justified because they're such a horrible criminal, or are they eliminating or changing the trajectory of God's plan for what it was supposed to be because they murdered somebody and they didn't go when God was ready for them?
Great question. I get this question a lot. So it does say do not murder. It does not say do not kill. So those are two different Hebrew words, right? So to murder is a completely different thing than to kill. For example, you're allowed to kill in self-defense. Somebody comes into your house, you are allowed to take that life if your life is being put into jeopardy. In fact, to go a step further, the reason why it made sense to ancient Israel, did you know that a life for a life, otherwise known as the death penalty, is the only law that is in all 5 books of the Torah? It's the only law. Not even the Sabbath is in all 5 books of the Torah. Now, the Sabbath exists in Genesis, but it's not in all 5 books. So this idea of taking a life if you take a life, what is it rooted in? Why does it matter? First of all, God is communicating to us the first thing. Taking human life is a major deal. That's God's first moral teaching in the Torah, that it's not to be trivialized. Let me give you another example. There's a law of the 613 laws of Judaism, of which we are not bound to the ceremonial law, which is one of them, that if an animal takes a human life, you must kill that animal. So it's okay, that's like, why do that? What are you going to have? Oh yeah, that's Lenny, he killed my uncle, and say hi. You're going to keep that animal around? The only punishment imaginable for taking the thing that only we are made in the image of God. So if you take another image bearer's life, what could possibly be a just punishment for that? According to the economy of God, it's that your life must also be taken. And according to scriptural theology, we are not taking that person's life. When you take another person's life, you already took your own life. I want you to think about that. If someone were to murder Alex or murder me, they already murdered themselves in that action. They already bestowed the punishment upon themselves. We are simply completing the task. And think about it. Some people will say, but Charlie, it's not fair because of whatever sob story liberal reason. How is it, and honestly, no, and I'll just close with it. I'll finish with this. But you know who it's not fair to? It's not fair to the victims. You are cheapening the lives of the victims. You are basically saying the victims die and you get to live. So you get to continue to live even though you took the lives of others. So for example, I think it's fundamentally wrong that creep who killed those 4 college kids in Moscow, Iowa, that he gets to keep living. So he kills 4 college kids and he keeps on getting to have life and those people don't. In order to say that those people's lives mattered, the only just thing that we can reason ourselves to is to take that person's life. And that is not murder, that is killing, and it's societal self-defense.
Your thoughts?
First of all, the terminology, societal self-defense, is very relevant to a lot of things that are going on right now. And it's an important thing for people to remember. We live in a very individualistic society, and many people tend to forget the sense of community and the importance that kind of bestows, that the concept of community that the feeling gives people. And therefore, societal self-defense is actually very critical, very important. Just to elaborate on what Charlie said, in Hebrew, to murder is to kill is laharog. So there are different terminologies, different words for those two things. And like you said, it's very different if you kill somebody by mistake or if you kill somebody on purpose, or if somebody is extrajudicially killed because of a crime they've committed, for example, murder. Yeah, so I think that it's very relevant. In Jewish theology, if somebody kills somebody by mistake, the concept of vengeance, the natural feeling, is assumed that the family may want to take revenge, even if it's a mistake. And like we mentioned back then, it may be harder there were no forensics. It may be harder to identify if somebody was deliberately or non-deliberately killed. And therefore, there was this certain level of acceptance that maybe if somebody took somebody's life, even if it was by mistake, the family has a right to take revenge and until that person is able to run away to
like almost an exile,
what's the
sanctuary.
name of the city? Sanctuary City, thank you. But then once he gets away to the sanctuary city, that's when he's safe and he's protected by the priests and the people there. So the concept is very nuanced, essentially. And I think Charlie does a very good job of explaining it. And hopefully his memory will be an inspiration to us all.
Absolutely. And in light of the things that have been happening recently, even since his passing, calls all this again into question and to really the right framing of how we should be thinking about it. The attack on the Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, which was very horrific, that's another just unbelievable event that just happened, and people are trying to grasp just how someone could even bring themselves to doing this. And there's still not a lot of information as to what really brought this man to going and driving his vehicle, his pickup truck, into the building and setting it on fire. But as we talk, let's talk a little bit about that. I think we do have a clip of kind of the totality of what it is. It's not a real news clip, but it does have the actual video for people to understand if they didn't see this in the news cycle. Let's take a look at just how horrible this was. So essentially that's when the church was on fire. There's nothing left of it. And that's his vehicle. You see Iraq written on the back. He's an Iraq veteran, so trained military, drove into the building, put a hole in it, and then not only opened fire, but the building ablaze, on fire. So people were found later that had succumbed to either the gunfire or the smoke. People were trapped in the building. It was just unbelievable. In fact, they interviewed a number of people who initially parishioners ran to help the individual because they figured it was just an accident, and they ran up to him. And as they were running up to help, they received fire. They were being shot at. How insane is this? And in context from what we were talking about, it's been reported that the Mormon Church, its members, have collected, the last number I saw was 225,000. It's probably a lot higher now, dollars, to give to the family of the shooter, which wound up dying. So the family's being left behind. I believe he had a wife and kids and the extended family, which has to somehow survive and live with this. And to think that the church collected money and that the members of the church are giving money to that family that destroyed their church, that killed parishioners, that's pretty amazing, don't you think?
It's true kindness in the face of evil. And that is rare, and it's a beautiful thing. And again, it's not that he came from a society that inspired him to do it, that supports this or anything like that. This is very different than other scenarios we discuss sometimes. His family is devastated just as much as the victims are. Unfortunately, it seems like at least 4 people were killed and 8 people were injured, and it's just truly devastating. I think that this is a continuation of what we've been seeing in the United States of repeated attacks on Christianity and on Christ. And it's just devastating and so heartbreaking to see. And we've been seeing this even more so around the world, and we're going to get around to discussing that further later on in this episode. But I did want to ask you, did he have 2 humongous American flags in the back of his truck?
Yeah, he did. He's an Iraq veteran, and he, in his own way, believed, I guess, he was patriotic.
Yeah, or he just went crazy. Hopefully the latter, because I don't know how any proud American could do anything like that. Usually when you see somebody with big American flags in their truck, that they're good Americans, basically very good people. Typically, it's very sad.
Yeah, no, it's just, again, mind-boggling. And imagine being the family of someone like this. So to see the outreach from the Church of Latter-day Saints to come for them to do anything to help, again, it echoes essentially the forgiveness that Erica Kirk gave, because in the end, the idea is that you're going to be judged anyways, and that shouldn't be in our minds. That negates what justice has to be served with the criminal justice system. It just on a different level. So
It is
it's,
worth noting that in his past, I don't know, recent past, maybe he dated a Mormon girl. And ever since then or afterwards, he started spewing a lot of hate against the LDS Church of Latter-day Saints. So maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe she was traumatized by something that went on in the church, or who knows? I don't know. Unfortunately, some things like that do happen. I don't want to insinuate anything, but something drove this guy to madness. He is an ex-Marine, which is even more devastating because those are the people you usually trust to jump in front of a bullet to save somebody else's life.
and again, it just shows that no one is excluded from issues with mental health, and this is an extreme example, and it fits in again to the conversation that we've been having on this podcast as to getting to the root of these things and what the trigger points are, what's making people become this way, what pushes them over the edge, because we really don't want to see this. Nobody wants this. And again, you can only at least pay attention also to how people are responding to it, which I think is the one glimmer of light
Silver
in the whole thing. Yeah, it is.
I recommend people take a look at the recent In Focus we recorded, where we discuss school safety, school shootings, and kind of gun safety as well.
Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and watch all our content, including episode 23 of the YoJoe Show podcast.